Greetings everyone, my name is Sedu Chuma for Financial Insight Zambia here in Dubai, the UAE, which is the venue for this year's COP28 conference. Joining me right now is WWF Zambia Freshwater Lead, Beauty Shamboko. Beauty, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So how are you finding the COP experience so far?
It's busy. It's been recorded that it's, I think, the most with the most people, about I think almost double the number that was from the previous COP27. You can tell actually when you walk in, it's busy, but very well organized as well. Yeah.
Okay, and you also had the opportunity to be part of the Freshwater Challenge, which is under your particular area of interest. Are you able to tell us some insights, share some insights from that particular challenge?
So the Freshwater Challenge yesterday was, we had a number of countries. So initially during the UN Water Conference, we only had 6 lead countries that then launched it. I was privileged to have been there during the launch. And so yesterday for me was a momentous occasion because we had this high-level ministerial event where we are now at 37 countries that have made commitment and have joined the global initiative. The Freshwater Challenge, of course, is the global initiative that speaks to the UN Global Biodiversity Framework of ecosystem restoration by 2030. For the Freshwater Challenge, the target is to have at least 300,000 kilometers of rivers across the globe and 350 million hectares of freshwater ecosystems like wetlands, peatlands, floodplains restored. And so it was a huge and momentous occasion because we not only had countries from Africa, but then we also had the big players in the world economy, such as the US joined the challenge, Canada joined the challenge, the UK also joined the challenge, and the EU was also there to speak. So I think it's uphill from here, and I hope we can then begin to now actualize the actual implementation. It was good also as a Zambian that we, as Zambia, because we've been a lead country from the time the global initiative was launched in March, that we were also able to then speak and give the opening remarks and just rally other countries to join the Freshwater Challenge.
That's really amazing. And particularly there was also some big news of the Loss and Damage Fund.
Yes.
Are you able to tell us just what that means for your area with regards to freshwater systems?
So, and this is something that the Minister yesterday in his speech during the Freshwater Challenge had talked about, that the climate crisis is actually a water crisis. Usually what we have in terms of disasters, they are weather-related disasters. Most of it is either floods, it's either drought, and those are the ones that actually are very, very closely related to our water resources. And therefore, having this huge injection of funding towards the loss and damage speaks to our being now as a global community, being somehow able to manage the communities that are hard hit by these disasters as well. So it came as very good news, and we welcome that, and we're hoping for more countries to actually inject more funds into it.
Oh, Beauty, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Ignatius. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Thank you.
What was your takeaway from that last discussion you had, the key takeaway? What are your thoughts? I have some thoughts of mine, but I'm happy to hear what you felt about it.
Yeah, I think the observation, especially when it comes to, how maybe the proposal on how the loss and damage fund can be managed, like managed by the IMF or managed by the banks. The question is, how can this work, especially when we are going to be dealing with local communities, because I'm focusing on local communities. So this creates already a barrier that excludes, the local communities, and in that case, we are mostly looking at women, children, youths, who may not have, the capacity, so to say, or may not have the means to be able to access some of these funds, especially when they are managed by banks. So, yeah, that one was worrisome, I must say.
Yes.
And a very, very important point to financing.
You've actually brought up a very important point, which is how often do we actually partner with the communities we're trying to help? And I think that's where the challenge lies, because we don't understand fully in detail without their involvement.
Yeah.
So to your point, it's something we need to look at and work on.
Exactly.
For me, what worried me is the talk around the fact that funds are available, but are these new funds, are these pledged funds, or is it actual cash in a bank somewhere ready to be deployed? Those are the challenges I have, and maybe it's up to us as the bankers to do something about it, to put our money where our mouths are.
Exactly. There are a lot of promises that are announced and never actualized.
Absolutely.
And this is really worrisome, and we need to really push for serious leadership with integrity.
Yes.
When they promise, they must keep their promise. That's why there's been a lot of campaign on keep the promise, keep the promise. So we have to have that integrity, in order for us to actualize climate finance. Especially that one will touch the communities.
No, thank you very much, Johnny.
Thank you so much.
Great. Right now, I'm joined by Nancy Rapando from WWF Kenya. Nancy, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Cedric.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So what's your experience with COP so far?
Okay, my experience with COP is about political negotiations. But the good thing about the climate COP is also about people making declarations on how they want to support climate actions. And so this is what we have seen in this COP starting from week 1 and now week 2. That is what is becoming louder, that there are declarations towards supporting climate action, but also the political narrative towards advancing the Paris Agreement is also happening,
And also, are you able to tell us a bit about the food report which came out? What are some of the key issues you've noticed from it and key insights?
Yes, today is the Food Day. Yesterday was the Land and Oceans Day, which really shows the interconnection between food and nature. And WWF, we occupy that space of food and nature because what we want is to ensure that food systems don't degrade the ecosystems. So we carried out a study, the Africa Ecological Food Futures Study, aiming at looking at how investments in Africa are impacting on ecosystems. So this study actually covers the whole of Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa, Western Africa, and Central Africa, and also Eastern Africa, looking into how does agriculture impact on key biodiversity areas. And with reference to Zambia, we have a lot of deep dive into the Kaza landscape. And what we are realizing is that as we farm, we are continuously getting into the conservation areas. So looking at the maps within Kaza, it's showing a lot of crop expansion into some of the areas that are meant for conservation. We're also looking at a lot of deforestation in Africa that is agriculture-led. What is striking about this report is that most of the degradation is not really out of commodities that are for export. It's actually out of smallholder farming for local food production. This implies that as we continue to think about feeding our people, we will continue to degrade the ecosystems if we actually don't take drastic actions. So what this report does, this evidence is actually going to be disseminated mainly across investors. We've worked with, we've informed the World Bank, we've informed investors like the Africa Development Bank that were part of this study to be able to actually see how investments in Africa could actually potentially degrade the ecosystems the way we are seeing it. So how do they refocus finance in terms of ensuring that they are ecologically sensitive, ensuring that every finance they're giving, they're very key to ensure that this finance does not get into a target area and degrade the ecosystems where farmers are producing from. So that is all about the report, and we are disseminating it on the 12th, looking forward to much participation even from the media to ensure that such information goes out to really inform Africa that we need to take care of nature as we actually farm, as we actually invest into agriculture. Thank you.
Oh, that's very insightful. And also, are you able to give us a bit of insight on how the food negotiations are actually going here at COP?
Yes, thank you so much. I keep on saying that the biggest food negotiations happened last year. At COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, where we got a big decision on agriculture and food security, climate action in agriculture and food security. And the decision is very clear after the over 5-year discussion within the Coronavia framework, coming out with a decision that is actually supporting farming systems to ensure that farmers respond to the climate impacts, looking at productive resources to be protected in terms of water and land, and also looking at also key issues of circularity on how this one on the farms can really support communities. So a lot came out of those discussions. This year, the discussion is actually around developing a governance framework and implementation modalities to actually ensure that these recommendations are actually implemented. So you might have seen that there's a lot of discussion that probably these discussions have not really progressed far, but I do understand that laying implementation modalities cannot really happen in one COP. So the negotiations, I think they've been okay. So if we get, even if it is next year, we get an implementation modality, that would be good. But from a country perspective, the Sharm el-Sheikh decision on agriculture and food is already getting implemented. Just to give an example, of a number of African countries are already developing frameworks to actually support implementation of that framework. To add on that, I think the day 2 of this climate negotiations saw a major declaration on the Emirates Declaration on Agriculture and Food Systems that really outlines a number of actions on food security, a number of actions on water resource management. All these actions are really focused on what Africa wants. So for me, that is a win already, that we got this declaration, and we want more African countries to sign it, to actually say that they're going to give farmers their good share in terms of climate action. Yeah,
that's very amazing. Nancy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Cedric.
Right now, I'm joined by Sevin Kalonga, who is part of WWF Africa. Sevin, how are you doing?
I'm okay, thanks.
I'm glad to have you. So I wanted to ask you about your experience with COP28 so far. What are some of your key insights and key takeaways so far?
Thanks. Normally the COPs are government-led initiatives where organizations like WWF, we come to support governments during negotiations. And governments are our key partner. And normally we don't come to the COP to support the government. We start supporting them before we even come to the COP. So as an organization, we have been working with respective countries where we have physical presence to support them on how they can make a meaningful negotiation when they come to COP. The ongoing COP, I would say we are expecting to have remarkable deliberations, because we see the movement, the way the presidency is being run, is so open, so transparent. Issues are being deliberated and decided on time. So we believe that the decision will be for nature, people, and climate.
And your particular area of interest is water as well as forest restoration. Able to tell us a bit of your experience on that from your perspective?
Right. My portfolio, WWF, is leading restoration work in Africa, and I'm supporting 9 countries, Eastern, Southern Africa, and a bit of Central Africa. When we talk of restoration, basically we work on degraded lands and deforested forests at landscape level to ensure that our efforts are rehabilitating degraded soils and also trying to increase forest cover in areas where there has been a severe deforestation. Why do we do that? We do for multiple benefits. We do for the benefit of people, we do for the benefit of nature, but we do for the benefit of mitigating the effect of climate change. So looking at those three all together, we do restoration to increase habitat for wildlife, to increase where there's fragmentation, also to increase forest cover as mitigation of climate change, but also increasing and managing water catchments to increase environmental flows. So the environmental flows could be increased for people, for wildlife, but also for ecosystem services. People also could use water for irrigation, particularly the downstream users. But there should be a balance between the upstream dwellers and the low, like downstream dwellers. If there's no balance in there, the downstream dwellers will enjoy water, but at the expense of the upstream people. But the upstream people also could do the same. They could start abstraction of water and decreasing the e-flows to downstream users. So we are working to make sure that we put these two groups together to support each other, to manage water catchment areas for the benefit of ecosystem people, but also nature.
Okay, and also with regards to the conversation around water and restoration efforts, what has been your experience from conversations here at COP as well? And also what are some of the initiatives that you are actually undertaking as WWF Africa?
We understand that some of the countries in Africa are water stressed. Water stressed, some with water scarcity, although not stressed. What we are working with these countries and governments, including Tanzania, is to make sure that we take a holistic approach to manage water catchments. So the management of water catchments, if we take a holistic approach, it means we bring all interested and affected parties together. Then we agree on an initiative on how we manage water resources. Could be through water allocation plans. We know how much could be issued to whom and when. This will help a lot in terms of managing the scarce water resources, of which is now like a big problem. That's why we hear of the water challenge problem. It's just one of the initiatives we want to bring on board with different actors and players to make sure that we solve the current challenge we have with water use.
Okay, that's very amazing. And what is going to be your key takeaway from the negotiations around water and restoration?
Yeah, the takeaway from the ongoing negotiation is international community does recognize that water is a challenge in most of our communities. Water for people, water for wildlife, but also water for ecosystem services. The completely e-flows, it is declining severely. That's why the international community is coming up with initiatives like the one I mentioned about the Water Challenge initiative. So that is one of the approach to solve the ongoing problem about water.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Severin. Enjoy the rest of your call.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Right now, I am joined by Jacqueline Mwende Kimeo of WWF Kenya. Jacqueline, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much for being here.
I'm glad to have you. So, are you able to tell us your experience with the COP so far? How are you finding it?
Yes, so far the COP is coming out well. I'll talk about the energy transition, which is a key thematic area of focus for WWF and also for Africa as a region. We have seen main commitments, close to 15 commitments on energy transition being pledged, and also a lot of resources being pledged for financing energy transition in Africa. So far so good, but that does not mean that we are out of the hooks yet, because the outcome of the negotiation is expected to come out in the next 2 days on Tuesday. And one of the contentious issues is that the options that have been proposed for the final text on energy transition, one of them is may not favor Africa in terms of prioritizing energy poverty in energy transition discussions. So as WWF Kenya, we are on the lookout to ensure that our priorities, especially around enabling energy access and addressing energy poverty, is really addressed also in the final text of energy transition.
that's
The
amazing.
phase out of the fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very interesting. And I would tell us about the energy negotiations. How are they going? How are you finding it so far?
No, so far so good. As I said in the beginning, there's a lot of traction on energy transition, and our African parties representatives are really up to the task and really championing the issue of phase out of fossil fuels, but also recognizing the role of oil and gas in the just energy transition discourse.
Oh.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk of just energy transition.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell us more about that?
Yes, from where we are as WWF Kenya, or in terms of the network in general, energy transition for us, one of the key priorities is to ensure that it addresses energy poverty, because we have close to 600 million people without access to electricity, and also 1.2 close to also the same number without access to clean cooking fuels. So our narrative is that energy transition must include energy access priorities, and also transition must also include the rights of the indigenous peoples and the local level. In a snapshot, energy transition must be driven and informed by the needs of the local people in the African context. Yeah.
No, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Greetings everyone, my name is Cedric Chuma for Financial Insight Zambia here in Dubai, the UAE, which is the venue for this year's COP28 conference. Financial Insight Zambia was privileged to be at the conference, giving coverage to several private sector clients of ours who were here. We also got to see several landmark announcements. Locally, we had the announcement of 100 initial mini grids, which was announced by the president in conjunction, the president of Zambia, in conjunction with the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. We also saw significant deals. Firstly, the very first green bond ever issued in Zambia, $200 million by CEC. We also saw a significant deal with regards to PPAs between Green Coal and Ilute Solar, as well as Serengeti Energy. That was some of the key highlights that happened with regards to our local news. And for the COP28 conference, this was a very special conference in that it's the very first conference with a global stocktake. What this simply means is there was a pooling of data to look at where we are in terms of the climate crisis and what gaps need to be addressed. It shows that we are in an unprecedented climate crisis, but we have a lot more work to do. The climate crisis affects every one of us, regardless of where you are, who you are, or any kind, and we only have one planet. I think that was something that really stood out from the global stocktake, and that more needs to be done. The other big news was, of course, the loss and damage fund, with pledged funds to actually help the damage and loss caused by climate change, and that's been a very significant step. More needs to be done with regards to that one as well. So it has been a very, very fruitful COP, and we were also privileged to cover Stanbic Bank Zambia, to cover FNB Bank Zambia, to cover WWF and Africa Green Co at this year's COP28 conference. Financial Insight Zambia continues to deliver, continues to provide relevant news up to date on the COP28 conference, as well as on our clients' activities at the COP28 conference. Financial Insight Zambia also takes this particular opportunity to thank our amazing sponsors, namely Africa Green Co, the WWF Zambia, FNB, as well as Stanbic, who are our core clients, and we are very excited for the continued growth of all our clients, and we'd like to thank them for this opportunity to offer Financial Insight Zambia services. We also would like to thank every other party that has helped get us this far and helped us execute a very, very fruitful COP28 conference coverage. Keep everything glued to Financial Insight Zambia media platforms and our website. Thank you so much for watching, and get to know.